Oh, really? That's my reaction right now when it comes to ICP. Nothing I say is financial advice, but why you may ask? It's because Dom, right? Or should I say Dominic Williams, who's the founder of Dfinity, very recently he made a post saying how last month there was 4 times more unique developers building on ICP than Ethereum and Solana and Sui, plus the entire Web3 ecosystem in total. Now, when it comes to the statement, that's why my reaction was like, oh, really? With a question mark, of course, because I just thought it's pretty interesting if that is hypothetically actually the case. Because even Dominic as well, right? He kind of alludes to the fact that Caffeine AI hasn't really even, I guess, scratched the surface, really. That's kind of the way you take a look at it. It's kind of like it hasn't really spread its wings yet. And still, it's already like that in terms of the statistics, I suppose. So I find that pretty interesting. Now, people may be thinking, okay, how come ICP is like just slightly above $3 then? Like, how does this even make sense if that is hypothetically the case? Well, kind of my reaction is sometimes stuff like this doesn't necessarily just translate automatically to the charts. If the charts are indicating that, the project's not doing good in terms of the price and whatnot, it doesn't necessarily sometimes reflect exactly that in terms of the fundamentals. Because if I take a look at it, Bitcoin had a pullback, right? But what bad thing happened fundamentally to Bitcoin? You know what I mean? Like, I don't think anything actually, in my perspective. For instance, the maximum supply, right, is still 21 million. We're talking about a project that the max supply stayed exactly still at 21 million, but there's a pullback. Does it mean the project became bad? I don't think so, actually, in my perspective, hypothetically. This is just my mindset, right? So kind of the same example sometimes is what I use for the internet computer and also other projects too. Okay, ICP is having a pullback, but does it necessarily mean that the project became bad? Like for instance, if ICP for whatever reason has a 50% pullback, right, does that necessarily mean that the project became 50% worse? I don't hypothetically think so in every single case. And also in this case, I just don't have that feeling because I saw ICP quite a while back ago. And I'm not even talking about many, many years ago. I'm just saying back in 2024, at one point, the price was nearly $19. So if I take a look at it, is ICP better right now fundamentally or back then? In my personal perspective, I actually think that it's better fundamentally right now. But if I take a look at the charts, it doesn't necessarily seem that way, right? But I think sometimes the reason why a lot of my friends think that way, at least I would presume, is because in real life, right? Sometimes if we see things like having a price cut or something like that, or let's say things are just heavily discounted, or let's say like something became from like 100 all the way to like $10 or something like that. Sometimes you might be thinking like, okay, what happened to it? You know what I mean? Like sometimes a 30, 40, 50% discount seems still a little bit normal in real life, right? When buying items or something. But sometimes, like if it's so massive, people like to wonder, okay, what happened? Did it become worse or something like that? Did it get damaged? Who knows, right? So I think sometimes that mentality is brought over into this space, in which case, arguably, I think not in every single case that seems to be the case, because, okay, ICP is down quite a lot, right? Basically around 6 times lower than where it was back at one point in 2024, but it had become 6 times worse. I actually think that it actually became a couple times better than before. Let me explain why. Because I take a look at the narrative when it comes to the AI aspect of the internet computer. I think it's actually stronger right now than before. Not to mention, I take a look at Caffeine AI. Who was talking about Caffeine AI back then? You know what I mean? Also, on top of that, I take a look at kind of the strides and sort of the popularity that the Solana and ICP integration and all this kind of did for the internet computer, even though it may not necessarily be the most popular thing, but still, if I take a look at all that, what's better fundamentally, right? ICP back in 2024 or right now? Arguably, I would say right now, but the thing is, actually, the market cap and the price is lower than before. But would I complain if something became better, yet the hypothetical, I guess, value became lower? I don't think I would, just because my mindset is, you know what, if something that I like before and I still like it right now, yet the market cap is way lower than before, I'm not going to complain. I'm not going to be, I guess, agitated at something like that because I just take a look at the improvements that the internet computer has made, right? And I also take a look at the improvements that Dfinity has made overall. So overall, I still like ICP. This is the way you take a look at it. And I think times like this kind of showcases really sometimes how the project hasn't given up, right? Because it's easy to give up when things are not doing good. The hard part sometimes is persevering when things are not doing the best. It's like, for instance, some projects out there, they update when things are doing good. But yeah, that's the easy part, right? The hard part is continuing to do things when the charts are not necessarily looking the best. So I still kind of like that perseverance when it comes to Dfinity. Not to mention, when I take a look at, for instance, I just think that the internet computer is a little bit more suited for developers moving forward as opposed to some of its competition. Let me explain why I think so. It's because I think the major hindrance some other projects out there have is the programming language, right? Because some developers out there, they've spent many years mastering a certain programming language, but then the thing is, now they have to change. Sure, they could do it, I guess, in some cases, but it's just a little bit, difficult, right? It's like, for instance, telling a tennis player to randomly become a ping pong player and just become world class as well. Like sometimes the sort of change from a sport to another, it's not that easy. You know what I mean? Dfinity has done a pretty cool thing, I think, in my perspective, because allegedly ICP supports multiple programming languages. Now, Motoko, it's the language that was, I guess, designed by Dfinity, if I would even want to put it that way. Yeah, I guess so. But besides that, it also supports like other aspects. Like, for instance, I take a look at programming languages that are supported through canister development kits, like in the case of TypeScript. That's pretty popular, right? Python, C++, Solidity, and it allows for, EVM-based smart contracts like Ethereum Virtual Machine. And I take a look at JavaScript. So really, in the grand scheme of things, is like, the computer kind of hindered in that aspect, because sometimes people like to tell me, well, developers don't really care about this. Well, it just supports like very popular languages just overall. You know what I mean? Like I mentioned before. So if a developer or something like that has already mastered sort of like Python, C++, or should I say familiar with it, building or let's say developing something, right, I guess, on the internet computer, it just might not feel as sort of, I guess, difficult as opposed to some other projects out there that kind of want to have a certain programming language and they don't want to support anything else. You know what I mean? So yeah, besides that point though, when I take a look at it as well, Dfinity, they kind of have this emphasis of things trying to be fully on chain, I guess, right? And I kind of like this because if I take a look at it, other projects out there, they're not really equipped to handle things fully on chain. Now, the reason why I think this is even a cool narrative to begin with, hypothetically, personally for me, is because why not have things run fully on chain? You know what I mean? Some of the projects out there, they say, oh, blockchain technology. But what are they really doing with it? You know what I mean? If things can't run fully on chain, then kind of sometimes I think what's hypothetically really the point in some cases, not in every single case, but I'm just saying in some cases. And when I take a look at it, why do some projects out there, they're not really talking about this, right? Because I think if their project could handle it, they would talk about it more. But why do I think that Dfinity talks about this when it comes to the internet computer, whereas some other projects out there don't really want to talk about it? Well, I think it's because some other projects out there are simply not really equipped to handle something like that. Because having things run fully on chain, it requires sometimes a lot of computational demand. Some projects out there, they're simply not built for something like that. It's like trying to run a marathon with Timberland boots. I don't know if I could do that, It's not really kind of designed, I suppose, hypothetically, maybe, for something like that, in my opinion and in my perspective. So when I take a look at the internet computer overall, I'm still a fan. Now, again, I'm still hypothetically thinking about $100, but we'll wait and see what happens. But really, at a market cap of, around 54 billion at that point, considering current circulating supply, around 50% less than BNB's market cap at one point back in 2021. I don't know if that necessarily surprised me, considering, I guess, the features that I do see when it comes to the internet computer. But again, only time will tell, and I'm still waiting. And that's pretty much about it. But I wanted to make this updated video to kind of talk about, Dfinity's founder, Dominic, I guess talking about this, right? And I'm not talking about Dominic Mysterio, by the way. I'm talking about, Dominic Williams, right? Again, the founder of Dfinity. But yeah, thank you for watching, and I hope you all have a very nice day. It's Wally the Captain.